Oh, we like the limelight?
The only ones I ever saw here, no.
We came to Keysville today, if you don't mind, and I feel like I'm back in grade school again. We're in the old elementary school in Keysville, which houses the village offices, the New York State Police satellite office, and I even smelled food when I walked in the front door. Gosh, I almost got sidetracked and never made it to room 19 on the 3rd floor. We knew it was a nutrition site or the senior citizens were meeting, but you know, anytime there's food, then I kind of almost want to make a left-hand turn and go in and see just how the forks are clinking. I don't know how many of you are interested in genealogy or even know how to spell it. It always corrects me on my spell check when I try to spell genealogy. We've talked about it on this program quite often, and it almost seems like the normal course of events to check into genealogy after doing chapters 1 and 2 of the French connection with our good friend, the doctor from Plattsburgh State. We've interviewed Clyde Rabideau Sr. almost more times than I could count in French or English. And I see his books are for sale right here. But Calvin said it's about time we go to Keysville, and I said, yeah, I like lots of people in Keysville. But let us go and interview some of the folks who work with the Northern New York American Canadian Genealogical Society. Can you say that 3 times without? So we are. And that's our reason for being here. Even as we were driving here, Calvin was handing me a piece of paper that tells me the background of the name Phaneuf. Who would ever guess that it wasn't French in origin? We're going to talk a little bit about that later on today. Once we do a program, people get interested, they download their own material, get interested for the name of their own family, get information, and like us to share it with you, and we don't mind doing that. We're here today. I don't see lunch anywhere on this floor, so I guess we're... I'm sorry. I don't even see a coffee pot. I think we ought to leave. Actually, our viewers will have no idea, but we got here like 45 minutes late because I was the one that was held up at my own place of business. But we're delighted to be here today. And if you're interested in where your name came from, what your family history is, what some of the other North Country names are today and what they were 200 or 300 years ago, I think it'll be a good idea for you to watch this edition of Our Little Corner. Stay with us. We're here for some fun. I should mention before that being in this building is not without precedent. You were here once before with the late Bob Venn. How many years ago? 8, 9? 10
yeah, something like that.
Years ago to find out a little history of this organization, and I don't know anything about the history, so I'm a babe in diapers here today when it comes to learning about this society. It's Barbara, otherwise known as Bobby, and
Right.
Which way do you pronounce your last name?
Seguin.
Seguin. And we know about 4 other possible ways of pronouncing it, but that's
And spelling it.
and that's not uncommon, is it?
Oh, no.
To have names changed to either to protect the innocent, or in one thing I read today about the Phaneuf name, it had a lot of it had to do with who was writing it down at the time when they got baptized,
Well,
and when they got married, and when they came across the border, and
Well, yeah.
that kind.
If you came into Canada, say off a ship, and the recorder, be an immigration officer or whatever he was at that time, and you were Irish and your name was McGee. Okay, but he was French. Well, there's 2 McGees. There's an Irish McGee and a French McGee. So immediately, automatically, you were French.
Yeah.
But 2 years later, you decide to go to the States. Okay? And the immigration officer at this time was an Irishman. Marvelous. You were an Irishman again. You weren't French any longer.
And
The spelling changed by M-C-G-E-E or M-A-G-E-E. And which McGee, which we now know as Maggie.
isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And the neighborhood priest would often be the one.
Please, they said the priests were the educated members of society. Well, if you'd never been to school, you couldn't read or write, And he'd been to second grade. Of course he was educated. He was better educated than you. It didn't mean he was a college graduate, but he had more education than you, that's all. But if he was an Irishman and you said my name was, there's a funny little story in doing records from Immaculate Conception in Keysville. There was a name, Des Trois Maisons, meaning of 3 houses, 3 homes. So I found in the records a man whose last name was De Trehome. Detreehome. And I thought, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, then I had this little fantasy thing. The little Frenchman and his wife go to church, and they want the baby baptized. And the little Frenchman's so thrilled, he's learning English. And the priest says, "What's your name?" He said, "You know, mon père, de Trehome."
There you go.
And that's how it happens. It happens. Betty Botten, we did a session on name changes and things for one of the conferences. And Betty Botten brought up the fact that there was a family that came in, and I'm sure there were many. When they came across the border, Frenchmen were very looked down on because they were common laborers, they were lumberers, they were farmers, they were this. And they didn't want people to do this or to look down on them, this, that. They changed their name to Liberty. They were free. They were free of all that influence. Their name was now Liberty. It really wasn't. It could have been anything. But look at the spellings. Just in Clyde Rabidou's books. There are 40-some-odd spellings of Rabidou.
Oh, sure.
And some he missed. Because I'm doing the Moorestown records right now. You wouldn't believe the spellings.
When he does an updated edition, you can fill them in. We learned that as little kids when we first started reading Shakespeare, how many different spellings there are for the name Shakespeare down through the years. But that's true of not just the Rabidou name, but
any name.
and many more.
Any name. Seguin started out as Seguin, okay, with the accent aigu on the E for the sharp E sound. And I met a sister, a reverend sister, who said to me, "You spell your name wrong." I said, "And who says?" She says, "Sayah."
Really?
No. No, I said, "You spell your name wrong." "Oh, no, I don't." I said, "Oh, yes, Eustace, who was from Cooperville in the 1800s, everybody says Sayah. Sayah. Sayah.
See?
And in Vermont, it's Sayer. Sayer.
Oh, I never would have connected
But it
that
is. It is.
Wow.
And Seguin, and then it gets a Q in it.
Yeah.
And it gets an E on the end.
Oh, good.
And of course, there's Seguin, Texas.
Oh, yes, of course.
And he was Spanish or something. I don't know what he was. But I don't know that it has any connection, but I don't know that it doesn't.
And it very well could. What we're pointing out is these studies are so much fun.
They're grand.
But in a perfect world, the book's for sale. Look, he's holding up. You brought that kid up right. He's talking about the book
from
for
the
sale.
best. He learned from the best.
I started to say, in a perfect world, you would take your name, and my name happens to be Little, and it would always have been Little since the beginning of time. No. But it is not a perfect
Petit.
World.
Petit.
It's not a perfect
Petit.
world, not even close to being a perfect world. So you got to go a long way. Even my middle name, my mother's maiden name was Requa, of French origin, and even that has changed spelling down through the years. So
I've never seen that spelling.
too bad. I'm one of a kind, as you can easily see.
Well, I'm impressed, but
No, don't be impressed. Bobby, you're the vice president of this here organization.
yes,
How
and
would-
the librarian.
And whatever else you want to be doing on a given day.
Yes, yes.
Let's find out more about you personally. Were you born and brought up around here?
I was born and brought up in Plattsburgh.
In the city?
Yes. Well, Fox Heights.
Fox Hill.
Fox Heights.
Well, One of the most interesting series of columns I've ever done for the newspaper was trying to trace down the origin of that name. Was it named because they hunted foxes there? Was it named for one of a number of people who were called Fox or Foxy through the years? And, you know, it's like,
I don't know.
well, we've done several, we've thrown out several possibilities, and just, you know, sometimes you just throw it up in the air and see where it lands.
Where it lands.
So how'd you end up down here, and how did you get interested in genealogy?
I was a student nurse at Champlain Valley.
Were you really?
Yes, I graduated from there
Wonderful.
a lot of years ago. And met my husband. His girl was on call one night for the OR, and she couldn't go out, so I subbed.
That's how it always starts, right? Okay.
And he was from Rouse's Point. So when we married, we moved to Rouse's Point. And then he decided he'd like a small farm. And this had always been his dream. So we looked around and we found some land in Moores. And, you know, abandoned farmland, but we had a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. And that's where I now live. I've lived there 20-some odd years. Oh, no.
You just make the trip to do this, then.
Yes.
Isn't that a neat
Yes.
idea? So you've been involved with this group for how long?
Oh, 10 years, 12 years. The society started in '83. I didn't know anything about it. And one time in the paper there was a little blurb, David Kendall Martin was going to have a class, beginner's genealogy. And my husband saw it and he said, oh, let's go. He wanted to trace the Sagans back. Okay, so we went and we were hooked. And we traced them back to France.
Did you really?
Oh, yes.
It's easy to get hooked, isn't it?
Yes, it's an incurable virus, as most of them are.
We won't go so far as to call it a flat-out disease. Incurable virus.
It's a viral type thing.
Once you get involved, then you tend to stick with it for a while. Some people, instead of joining a wonderful group like this, they get involved on the internet and they start getting ripped off with people wanting to sell them wonderful programs for hundreds and hundreds of dollars that will automatically trace their ancestry back 450 years.
But none of what's on the internet is authenticated.
Well, that's the whole point.
And much of genealogy you can authenticate. Records burned, they got lost. The state didn't mandate that records were kept. New York State didn't mandate records were kept until 1895. So most of your towns don't have anything earlier. Sometimes you get lucky and you do find some earlier records, but not often. There weren't too many Catholic churches in the area. Catholic records are easier to find than non-Catholic ones, incidentally. But the churches in the area that were here, now St. Joseph's in Cooperville is one of the earliest, and that's in the 1840s. But we were administered out of Canada. We were part of the Diocese of Albany for many, many, many years, and that's an awful big territory. They couldn't get to us. We have people, you'll find in church records, there's a marriage and a baptism of 7 children, all the same day. Well, yes, they were married in a civil ceremony. They had 7 children, and the priest finally showed up. They got married. The kids got baptized. It was great.
Isn't that beautiful? What do you have in this room? Sure, it started a lot smaller than it is now.
Oh, yes. Now, Bill Marquis was the founder of this, and it was kind of based on the one in New Hampshire. There's a society in New Hampshire that's been in existence I don't know how long. How long, Bill?
Get over here a little bit closer.
Probably about 10 years before us.
And we were 83. This is our 20th anniversary year.
Yeah. It goes
An
by
anniversary of a lot of things this
Yes.
year. The anniversary of Flight, the Wright brothers, and who knows what all.
In fact, I tried to get this society as a branch of their society when I started, but they didn't want to cover us because they said we were too far away. But they were kind of a little teed off when we used part of their name. They're the American Canadian Genealogical Society, and we're the Northern New York American Canadian Genealogical Society.
I don't think there's any trademark on the words American or Canadian in that.
I haven't seen them copyrighted anywhere.
So I don't think you'll have any trouble with that
Well,
copyright.
they come around after a while.
So you are the one that got this thing going all those years back,
There was about 9 of us all together that went to the first meeting.
just because of a common interest, right?
Yeah.
And where was it held here at first, or where was it?
No, well, we was in with the Anderson Falls Historical Society at first. And then we just got too big, and they got too big, and we started getting in each other's way. So did we have this room first? I think so. Yes.
Well, we had just this room,
Just this room.
and it was a lab in the old school.
Was it?
It was an old tile floor. Many were missing. There were outlets in the floor with covers on them. It was, you risked your life walking in here. They didn't have very much money. We don't have very much money now either, but we spend a lot. They started out small, and my God, how they've grown. How the whole thing has grown. But if it wasn't for Bill and his little nucleus of people to start this, we'd be nowhere.
I donated about $4,000 worth of books to start.
Did you really, of your own thing?
Yeah.
Did you buy them then, or were they already in your
No.
library?
They were his personal books.
My personal books to get the organization started. So,
Now, what kind of books are we talking about?
marriage repertoires.
Ah,
In Canada, right now, about 90% of the churches have been made into books, and they call them marriage repertoires.
oh, see, I learned something every day.
Yes, and now the baptism and burial repertoires are becoming available. Slowly, but
I
they
mean,
are.
If we had $1 million, we could spend it tomorrow
Oh, we could have spent it yesterday.
on books.
Why wait till tomorrow?
There's just that many books available, but you can only buy what you can afford.
We get, conservatively, 6 catalogs a month, book catalogs, genealogical publications. They're from everywhere. And, oh, I cry. I cry because I can't spend it, because I don't have it. But there's so much available.
In the real world, you should spend about 20% of your budget for books. I don't know if we do that, but
I don't know the board. They've been awfully generous lately, and I have not let a penny go to waste.
But reference materials are the name of the game when you're in the business of genealogy.
Oh,
aren't they?
yes.
you talk about name changes. I know a family up in Shazy. They're very well known in this area. The Parkers. They make maple syrup.
Do I know the Parkers? Do I know Earl and Pat? and
He's
their
been
whole family?
drinking their
But
syrup.
who knows? Who would think that their name was really Paquette?
No, I didn't know it until you just told me.
They had their children, their family had a kind of a rough accent. They would say, the kids would go to school first of all, and the teachers would say, what's your name? They say, Pocket.
Yeah.
Pocket. So they became
Parker.
Parker. Now, they wasn't really, they was Paquette de la Valley, the Paquettes who lived in the valley. There was also Paquettes de la Mountain and Paquettes de la Riviere who lived by the river. My wife's family, she was a Fortier. Now, any name in Canada that ends in T-I-E-R, when they came to the States, they became K-E-Y.
K-E-Y, Forky.
So they became Forkies.
Castine.
Chatier. You got
That was
Pellet-
Castaigene. Castine. Also root. Don't ask me where root came from, but I found it in one of the books the other
You
day.
can imagine, though, can't we, Calvin?
From our family tree.
Yeah, from the family tree.
Oh, I see. Of
Root.
course.
Root means your family roots. But so many like Pelletier, Pelkey, all those names that ended in TIER, 90% of them, when they come to the States, they became KEY.
Oh, yeah. We had a man here 2 years ago at conference was looking for braconnier. And it's now Brockney.
Names,
And Beausoleil. Beausoleil.
Sure.
It's a lot of it was lazy pronunciation. A lot of it was lack of ability
That's
to
what
spell
happens.
properly.
That's what happens to every language. Ultimately, it's the product of lousy pronunciation and usage.
I know if
We
I-
bastardize the language through the years, and so these crazy words become common usage after a while.
I know a name, they were Chalibois, which means Charles Wood. They moved from this area and went down into Essex County, which was mostly all English. So down there, their name got changed to Wood. They knocked off the Charlie Wood.
It
The
was
name
easier
got
to say
changed
Wood.
Wood. Now, later on, they came back up here and went up in the moors, and the priest looked at Wood, and he said, no way. He wrote in the books Dubois.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
And I've heard Chalivois pronounced Charlie Boy.
Yeah.
A lot of people say
So-
Charlie Boy.
Names get changed.
I interviewed, and I can't tell you because it has to do with my job, but I interviewed a young person the other day in his 20s, and he pronounced his name. And I said, well, that's an interesting pronunciation. Were you related to so-and-so 2 generations back? He said, yeah.
That was my great.
There have been 2 different pronunciations since his great-grandfather died, and now they just decided they're going to put the accent on a different syllable.
I know some in my mother's family, they was named Clifford from Maine. And the oldest Clifford, he got in a row with the family. He was supposed to take care of the mother and father. He signed a contract to take care of him, and he would get the farm. Well, he reneged. So he was married to a Thompson. So he changed his name to his wife's name, and it became Thompson. And all his children are all Thompson, but they're really Cliffords. See, there was no paperwork to change your name in those
Just
Oh,
did it
no.
indiscriminately.
If you didn't like what you were called, you
My
called
father,
yourself
my
something
father was born Gordon Eugene Russell Little. There were 2 Gordons that lived in a duplex house when he was a kid, and they both came when somebody hollered Gordon. They both came, so they said, "Okay, you're Russell and he's Gordon." So for the rest of his life, as was Russell E. Little, the Gordon is on his birth certificate, but on no other official document for the rest of his life.
Gordon could be Godin
Yeah.
Godwin.
or Golden.
Now, when we're having a lot of fun with this so far, and I don't want to discourage people before they begin, but you better be persistent when you start tracing down your ancestry, because you're going to run into stone walls more than they have in West Shazy.
You
Oh,
gotta
yes.
have an open mind when you do genealogy.
Very much.
If you come here, I had a guy, he came here with a closed mind. He would only take one spelling for his name. He says, that's the way my father did, that's the way my grandfather did. I said, well, that's not right. So finally, one day he was here and he said, I'll change my mind today. See if you can help me. Just for the day, he said. Once he changed his mind, we were able to help him and take him all the way back to France.
Or somebody will come in and say,
Oh,
here it is,
yes.
let me know when it's done.
Oh, no, we don't work that way.
No, but that's
I
what
had-
some people
oh,
expect.
yeah.
They expect to walk in here and you'll just print it, get a printout before they leave at 4
I got a
o'clock.
letter back there. A guy called me from Montreal, is a friend of mine. He asked me if I'd look up one marriage. I said, okay. He sent me a letter with about 15 things to look up. I don't have time.
And they want it yesterday, and they want it for nothing.
I don't have time.
I
had a person one time that sent me, he wanted me to look up his family. I went to Montreal 3 or 4 times. I even got a parking ticket twice up there, $40 a piece. I finally did about 60 hours work. I sent him the information. He sent me back a nice letter on a, first of all, he sent me a nice letter on a word processor, very well written and everything else. So I gave him a bill, I think of $120 for all my time. He said, "Oh, I can't afford that," he says. I said, "Well," I said, "send me what you can afford." He sent me $5.
I remember hearing that.
You won't. That's probably a name you'll never forget, right?
Well, that's what discourages you. That's
Yeah.
what discourages you for doing work for somebody else.
Well, that's
It's
like
true.
That's like a priest or a minister who performs a marriage, and the community believes they're obligated by the cloth to do that for nothing, and so they walk away or put a $5 bill in an envelope. My father was a minister, so I that's one of the reasons we stayed poor for all those years. But it's true. People don't realize that this is what you do.
But I've made 5 or 6 books. I've made books on the Parquet, not the Parquet, the Provost. And I had a woman the other day, a couple months ago, she wanted me to do research on the Provost. They had referred her from the society to me because they knew I had 11,000 Provost on my computer.
11,000.
Oh, that's not bad. A bad number.
You've got to be kidding.
I was able to help her, but in the meantime, getting all her information, I was able to add about 500 more to put on my computer.
But isn't that the way that it happens? You'd get it.
It's people
Relationship.
helping people.
You know,
It
my
really is.
wife's mother's maiden name was Trudeau, and I've got a pretty good handle on the history of the Trudeau family. And we saw something in the newspaper one day about a woman who was a policeman in Florida who was very interested in the Trudeaus and was connected not too many generations back. And so all I did was send her a little email. And you know what I got in? 67 pages of Trudeau.
Wonderful.
So we sent about 50 or 60 pages back that we had, and those 2 documents met somewhere in the middle and fought it out and landed. And isn't that neat how that works
Oh,
out?
yes.
There are many people doing research on families. If they could all get together on the same family, you
Yeah.
say.
So I want to know what's different today than it was the first day you started your organization 20 years ago? What's the biggest difference? Is it all the books you have? Is it the space, the number of people? What is it?
Is it all the above apply?
We got more books, we got more machines, we got more space. Now we got 2 rooms.
We have more members.
Yeah, let's talk about the structure now, the organization. You're the VP because the president couldn't be here,
Right.
or they knew you would just jump at this opportunity. So how does the structure work?
We have officers, a slate of officers, and we have a board of directors. And Gloria's on our board, and Ron and Carol are on our board. And we have, our board members are listed in our journal. We publish a journal twice a year, primarily articles that people contribute to us. Not all genealogies, but mostly. We have membership in every state but Wyoming, North Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas. We were looking at the map a few minutes ago. We have membership in Australia,
How did
Hawaii.
they find you in the first place?
They're North Country people.
Oh, I see.
Or their forebears were North Country people. They came across the border, or they came into the port of Montreal, or they came into New York, and then came north. They There are people whose roots are here. And so they've moved to Australia, or British Columbia, or Alaska, or the Yukon Territory, anywhere.
You know, we have discussed this when we were talking with our good friend the doctor in a program we call the French Connection at the college. We think today that we're a very mobile society. We can, you know, get on a plane or get on a train and get on a car and head places. But, you know, 200 years ago, people were moving and grooving too.
Oh, yes, they were.
Talk about the French Connection of all the thousands and
yes.
thousands of people. who
Very
came
often we will find you know, like you'll find a couple living in the States and you can't find the baptism. And you look, the child was baptized in Canada. They were taken back to Grandma's parish to be baptized.
See?
And that's why we can't find it. But
I know a lot of people who, they didn't have transportation to go out west. They walked out west.
they walked a lot of
How many
places.
people have we interviewed that walked 500 miles across Europe after the Second World War? I mean, you know, I was
Oh,
thinking
yes.
about that the other day. I said, no wonder I'm fat. I jump in my car, I get on an elevator, ride an
Yeah.
escalator, instead
But
of parking
these
the car
people-
downtown and walking to work.
As
you know?
harsh as things were, they traveled extensively.
They did.
And this was even before railroads. I mean, they thought nothing of hopping in the horse and buggy and taking off.
Well, you
I
know,
mean,
people don't realize it.
it mattered nothing.
I have newspapers that date to the 1700s that talk about the stagecoach fares and when they left from where in New York City. If you wanted to come to Albany or come up to through this area, and you could jump on a stagecoach like we get on a bus or a train. You know,
Doing genealogy, you got to know the migration patterns.
you got to know a lot. I was thinking when you people were just talking, I don't want to interrupt, but you got to know the socioeconomic history of people and their country, the political history, the history of their wars and peace times and migration.
How do you think they got out west? They went down from here and they went down and they caught the canal that went to Erie, the Erie Canal. They caught that, then they got over to the Great Lakes and they caught a ferry out to Detroit and those areas. Then they took wagon trains.
Well, we got the Irishmen here to build the canal, so, you know, I mean, think about it.
But you got to know the migration patterns.
Sure you do.
The people from around this area mostly came from above Montreal and down this way. The people from Rivière du Loup and that area went up to northern Maine, and they went that way and then down. That's where my family came.
So many families did come, they came from somewhere in Europe, went to Canada, and then came across the border.
Oh,
That's what the
yes.
Littles did. That's what my ancestors came into Canada and then down to the Rochester,
Oh, yes.
Buffalo, Rochester
yes.
area.
Well, you figure along the Richelieu River, there's not a lot of arable land,
That's true.
okay?
That's one thing
You
that
have
brought it
mountains both sides. All right, so you were a farmer and his wife, and you had 8, 10, 12 children, because everybody had 8, 10, 12 children.
Sure.
And your land maybe was this wide, but it was certainly deep.
Yeah.
And they ran out of room, so they started moving where they could make a living. In the wintertime, they came down, Maine, Vermont, New York.
Worked in
They
the
did
mills.
they did lumbering, they worked in the mills.
Sure.
Then the railroads came. And all those mills, the cotton mills and the woolen mills and all this opened up in the New England states. My husband's grandmother was born in Massachusetts. But only because they were working then in the mills. And in Massachusetts, or in some of the states down there, they would hire everybody in the family.
The kids.
I mean, from 5 years old up. Everybody could work. So we could make plenty of money to go home.
And the mill very often had their own housing for the people that worked
Oh,
for
yes.
them. And interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huh?
It all is so involved, and so many things depend. You know, you say, okay, well, we'll trace your family back. You may have to go 97 miles that way, 63 miles that way, 42 miles that way, and you're right back where you started. But you find them.
That's absolutely.
Not always, but most of the
I
time.
want you to just show us around this room a little bit and tell us what you have here.
Okay.
Hold on a minute. You know, you were mentioning about Massachusetts and about how many of our French-Canadian friends came down and settled in Maine and Massachusetts. Dr. Sylvie Baudreau, whom we've done 2 episodes of the French Connection with so far, and even though she speaks with a French accent, was born in Springfield, Massachusetts. So that just underlines what you said before. And has she been down here?
She's been a speaker for us 2 times, yep.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Who are you?
I'm Gloria Pratt.
Gloria,
I'm
we're
with
delighted that
membership.
you allowed us to come up the stairs here today.
No problem. We'd love you having you. I'm with membership. We have over 500 members in our society, and we've come up a long ways. And people from far away, we have Western Australia, France, Italy, a lot of Canada, Prince Edward Island. And I think the nicest thing about this is a lot of people say, what can you do for me? You know, I'm way out here in California or wherever, and you're not any good to me because I can't use your library. We have what we call a query in our journal for people who are members. If you're not a member, you have to pay for a query. If you're a member, it's free. You write a query to ask whatever question you want to know, and that's what we do. We look that up for you because we know you can't make it to the library at no charge.
Now, most of the people who are here today, do they get paid for what they do?
No, we're all volunteer.
All volunteers?
We love it. We just love it.
What would the North Country be without volunteers,
You got that right.
Let's introduce some of the other people at the table.
I'm Ron Allen.
Ron, glad to have you here.
I live in Peru, but my roots are in Keysville, at least on my father's side of the family. I'm corresponding secretary of the organization, also a volunteer librarian, as is my wife, Carol.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Before we go too far, Ron is also the town historian for Peru, New York.
Terrific.
Just recently
Just
appointed.
got that, yep.
And I found it's impossible to separate genealogy from history.
Well, as I said before, you need to know.
Absolutely. If you're not interested in history when you begin, you certainly will be before you finish.
You're right.
Were you first interested in genealogy as a couple, or did you have your individual interest before that?
I've always sort of been mildly interested in it, but since I retired 7 years ago, became very interested in it.
Retired is a very interesting word, isn't it, Ron?
Yeah, you're right.
But it's a very interesting process, and it's never ending. And by that I mean you can never reach a point where you say, well, now I'm finished, because it just goes and goes and goes. It's exponential, and you may be investigating a particular strand of your family and hit a dead end, and you'll pick up another and explore that. And eventually you might find a piece of the first one, and it just goes and goes and goes.
I love it. Let me walk behind you to see if Carol agrees with everything.
Oh, everything, yes. Plus, you have to have a lot of room in your house for all the things you collect, all the papers and
You've
books.
got a house like that, too?
Yes, oh, yes, we certainly do. Yeah.
My wife and I are alone in our 6-bedroom house, and we don't have nearly enough.
We don't have any bedrooms left. We have a lot of interests in the
They
different
changed
bedrooms.
designations over the years, don't they?
They certainly
huh?
changed,
Put
yes.
shelves where the beds were, and desks and drawers and boxes.
Right,
And
yeah.
But does it become? Somebody talked about it as a virus before. I don't know if that was too strong or not strong enough, but it certainly
Compulsive,
becomes
yeah.
a passion, doesn't it?
It really does, yes.
Especially if you run into one of those obstacles, as you called it. It's like putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle, and the dog ate one piece.
Right,
Right?
exactly, yeah.
And you can't find that piece.
Yeah, and almost every line, I think, that you start working, you find that there's a block someplace that you have to work through. But that's what makes it interesting and challenging. It really is. It's-
Ron, is there any stone you would leave unturned to find that piece of some puzzle you're working on? I mean, what lengths do you go to?
Absolutely not. You just keep looking and looking until you eventually find it. And they turn up in the strangest places sometimes. When I started out, my name is Alan. I just assumed that it was probably an English name. And lo and behold, my great-grandfather, when he came down from Canada, his name was Oligny, O-L-I-G-N-Y.
Come on.
Which is nothing like Alan.
Would you?
But,
Now, that's about the most bizarre connection I've ever heard in my life.
but to become Americanized, their name was changed, and they did it voluntarily. And
The name
you-
Allen does go back many, many years, but it just didn't in your case, that's all.
No, I was hoping when I started that I'd be tied in with Ethan Allen somewhere and the Green Mountain Boys. No such luck.
We all dreamed that we were some prince or king or something in another life, but it's generally much more mundane, isn't it?
Actually, I have a better chance of being related to the Ethan Allens than he does, because Ethan Allen was related there was a baker. His mother was a baker, and that's my maiden name, so,
No kidding.
yeah. And interestingly, the bakers were some of those people who walked many, many miles to go. They were in the Wyoming Valley when the massacres were occurring down there, and they walked 200 miles to Danby, Vermont. And then from there, they came over here. They were part of the Quaker settlement in Peru. So it's,
And there were a lot of bakers here in the North Country, and still are.
yeah.
When I married my wife, her name was Baker, and when she accepted me and my 2 kids, and I accepted her and her 11, they were all named Baker. So most of my kids are named Baker.
Oh, really?
So we're very much involved.
Oh.
And we've the Baker name is a substantial name around West Plattsburgh, and
It is, and I found just recently that I think his name was Ezekiel Baker, that's buried, I believe, up in that, when you're going through on the Northway, there's a little Baker cemetery way up there with that big
sure.
tree.
Yep.
He was one of my great-grandfather's brothers. So they're probably all connected, but I haven't made the connections yet, but someday I hope to do that.
Sometimes as investigators, because that's exactly what you are, you come up with connections that sometimes I imagine would surprise you and once in a while horrify you, huh? About how people are connected back not too many generations.
That's true. We haven't found any real skeletons, but an interesting, in my research, I reached a point where I thought that I might be related to a daughter of the king, the filles du roi. They were not royalty per se, but simply women that the King of France provided with a dowry to come into Canada in the late 1600s to marry settlers and French soldiers. But they were called daughters of the king. And when I started my research, and I was about 3/4 of the way through it, and my wife was doing research on her family, and lo and behold, she came across a piece of research that led her to believe that she also was tied into the daughters of the king. The moral of the story is she finished her research before I finished mine. So now she's certified, received her certificate in the mail the other day, and I still have to send mine in. So she beat me, but
It's always nice to know that you're not really first cousins anyway, right?
Oh, that's possible, too.
What you have, I love old books and manuscripts, and you have one that looks like it was written before 1990. What is this?
This starts in 1888. This is particularly, we're working on births right now, trying to research some of our family history.
Oh, boy.
And we're finding that
It's town of Keysville. Is it town or village?
the village, even on the same entry line for one individual, we found variations of spelling as many times as 3.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? On one entry
one
line.
line.
That goes to prove how difficult this business is. I was just looking down Father's birthplace, and you got everything from Au Sable Forks to Canada to Keysville to Vermont to Black Brook and everything you can imagine in between.
And the handwriting, unfortunately, is not always very legible. For example, we couldn't figure out what that name was. There's just no logical spelling
Yeah,
of it.
first of all, you don't know if it's an H or a K or a... Oh, isn't that amazing? What do you think? What would you guess? Have you got the best eyes in the world? Well, look at all the glasses come out here. It looks like Hyveille.
Hyveille. Lambert. LaMountain.
Yeah, the last name is LaMountain, but the
Yeah.
first name,
Could be Hiawatha for all I would. No, I probably wouldn't be very good at this business. You almost need handwriting experts.
After you read enough of them, like the church records.
Yeah, get over here. You're too far away for me to hear you. After you read enough of
After
them.
you read enough of them, they're partly in French, the church records. They're partly in Latin. The priests weren't very good at Latin, but they did pretty well. After you read enough of them, though, it becomes a lot easier. After the first dozen.
It's like trying to translate old manuscripts, even old English manuscripts where printing was entirely different, even when they were in books, printed.
Oh, yes, your F's and your S's.
And all of that stuff, but after you've done hundreds and hundreds of pages, then it kind of
Oh, yes.
jumps out at you,
But they were saying the difference in the name spelling, even in the same line, on birth certificates. Right now I'm working with the Moore's Town records because they're going to have their bicentennial celebration in 2004, and I'm on committee. And right now I'm doing the town records, and they will spell, like the father's name is probably, or the child's name, because it leads with this on these copies of these birth certificates, and it will say the child's last name is, say, Begore, B-E-G-O-R-E, but the father's name is B-E-G-O-R. There is no E. And then they've listed the mother with the same last name. Well, you know that's not right, but you can't change it. And sometime it is right. You have
Oh, sure.
Hiram LaValle married to Delia LaValle,
Oh, sure.
and you don't know that that's not so. But they've spelled the kid's name without the E, and the father's name with the E, and the mother's name with the capital L and the capital V, and the father's name without it, and the child's name without it. But you just write down what they wrote.
And it's easy to look at a book like this and try to figure out what a given letter
yes.
is, let alone a given name, right?
Yeah.
You can't even figure out what one letter is. I know those were done in the month of July, so I know every one of those has
that's
to be in July. Gloria, you didn't tell me how you first got involved in this organization and where your interest came from.
Well, I have an aunt who was in her 80s, and she was doing genealogy in our family, and she said that she was going to give it up because we gave her an 80th birthday party, and she said, "Oh, no, I'm too old for that. I just realized I'm too old." So my sister-in-law and myself got interested in trying to get her interested again so she wouldn't give up, and so we got hooked. It's that easy. You do get hooked. In fact, years ago, somebody said to me, "You're doing so well, you ought to do it for other people." And oh, never. I want to do my family, but not anybody else. Here I am. You love it.
I think you enjoy looking up other people's information, too. It's just you enjoy being able to give them something like that.
The word passion is one that I use a lot. And if you can't find passion about something, then you certainly haven't lived an interesting or exciting life. But when you do get a passion, then you like to share that.
I think
You're nodding, Ron.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I agree.
I think we're just as excited when somebody here says, "Oh, I found it," or if we can help them go back that other generation. It's wonderful. We have good feelings about that, just as much as we do with our own family, don't you think?
It's like taking a shovel, going out back and digging up stuff all the time. And in a sense, that's exactly what you're doing, right?
That's very true. I'm a retired educator, and one of the goals of any educator, any teacher, is when that spark, you ignite that spark in a child. And this is very similar. People come in looking, and when you can help them make a connection, just the look on their face, it's just...
I think unfortunately there's, I won't say the whole generation, but there are some people in the new generation of teachers who don't quite get the idea that spark is part of the whole process. And that's not an indictment against a whole generation, but I think the newcomers should interview people like Ron Allen
I do too.
over and over and over again to see what great satisfaction there is in touching one life and 10 lives and having people who are now, how old, come back to you and say, Ron, you know, I was in your class. How long did you teach?
32 years.
Well, there you go. So that covers a little bit of territory.
And I can vouch for that, because he had one of my daughters, and she still thinks the world of him.
See that? I want to, just before we move around the room a little bit, I want to talk about the responsibilities of being a local historian. You people are all historians, and just by the nature of what you do. But to accept that responsibility of being a historian for a village, a town, a community, a city, a county, it has wider dimensions that some of our audience might realize, I think.
It does. In our particular case in Peru, many of our town records were lost. They had a fire a few years ago in what was the temporary quarters of the town hall and the old Grange Hall. And when that burned, we lost many of our records. So we're essentially starting from scratch with many of our backgrounds.
That's a daunting task, isn't it?
It is, but I hope to reach out to the public, and I'm sure there's information out there. People have duplicate copies of books and records and whatnot, old photos that they would be willing to at least let us copy if they didn't donate them outright. But many of I also understand that I'm one of the first of the area historians to have email, an email address.
Whoa,
so
welcome to the world.
I'm quite confident that once that email address gets out there and people know it's there, the communication channels will open even
Well,
more.
hopefully this will be seen by more than 7 people, and maybe 5 of them will live in Peru. Who knows? What is that email address?
Peru Town Historian @charter.net.
Well, that's pretty simple.
Yeah, really.
So you just started this, Ron?
That I just not even a week ago.
Oh, my goodness.
With the email address, I was appointed town historian at the late January, so I'm brand new.
Every historian has a different concept of what his or her job is. And in the old days, for some of the local historians, it was enough to peruse the paper every day and cut out what they thought was interesting and put it in the archives.
True.
But for people who are serious about it, especially those who've joined the computer age, there are many ways to gather information and preserve it, including what Calvin and I are doing right now.
Absolutely, yes.
I think another thing too that's very important is this job that Ron has just taken over. There are no books for them to work with, no Peru books. Lincoln Sunderland has put out 3.
He had 3 volumes. Right.
They don't have that.
Oh,
So
come on.
I'm serious, they don't
They're
have any of
gone?
these things. They're gone. They have nothing to work with. So anybody who sees this, who has extra books or extra articles or extra anything on Peru,
Photos. And
photos, what else do you need?
anything that pertains to Peru and has ignorable significance.
Conversations with people, too, I think are very important. Anyone that has information that some of the older people, it's really, we need to tap into those older people who have memories and can tell you what Peru was like years ago.
We're big fans, Calvin and I, of oral history, and I always have been. When I was on the radio, I made a point to traveling to people I knew who were reaching the age of 100. And I have a large stack of audio tapes that I've made, and we've interviewed many people. We interviewed a lady who celebrated her 104th birthday over this past summer in July, and isn't it incredible?
It is, it really is.
Things they tell you that are not written down anywhere.
You got me
Family
interested
history.
in one of them. I can't remember what her name is, but I think it's the same one. I've seen it on one of your films that you show. And I was so interested because, again, history, right? You know the names. And I said, I wonder who she is, I wonder what her husband's first name is, because you didn't cover that, okay? You didn't cover the names of
See, you should go. The next time we
grandparents.
do it,
There you
you're gonna
go. You didn't, and I'm thinking, I got to know this, I got to know this. You just get a phobia. So I get out a family sheet, start filling out what I know from the video I just saw, okay? Because I'm taking notes while I'm watching this
Never
video.
take notes on what I say.
Yes, oh no, yes, it was great. Do you know, when I got off watching the video, I went back and I checked into some places. First thing I looked in is Headstone Inscriptions by Clyde Rabideau.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful book. Found her husband's name. I found her name under her husband's name, the date that he died, the year he died, the year he was born, and I found hers, and I found where they were going to be buried, and I thought, whoa, Redford, that's kind of funny. Look in Redford, and guess what? I found all her brothers and sisters, and I knew they were theirs.
Isn't that how it works?
Just from your video. That's how I started that one, seriously.
See, sometimes we don't know what we start, do we, Calvin?
We really don't.
We're interested in those things. There are so many of the little family cemeteries. Somebody mentioned, I think Bobby mentioned the Baker Cemetery and other little family cemeteries. And unfortunately, when there are descendants who have no great interest in
And they
it,
don't for
these
years.
cemeteries go to rack and ruin sometimes.
I didn't have any
You have to
interest.
discover them.
I didn't have any interest till I was about 45, something in that line. So I mean,
So
you
you've been
know,
doing it for about 3 years now.
no longer than that. But thank you.
But no, I mean, I'm sure you've all looked in
Oh, yeah.
gravestones. I had an aunt that used to love to go to England to do rubbings of the beautiful brass memorial plates on graves and so on. And many of my ancestors on my mother's side, since they were French Huguenots, settled down with the Dutch around Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. And there's a beautiful little cemetery. Have you ever been there?
We were down, what was the name of the town? I can't remember it, but it was down in that area when you went to the conference. There was a wonderful town with all these stone buildings, and there was a wonderful old cemetery. It was all French Huguenots. It was wonderful to look through this.
Well, what is now called Sleepy Hollow has a great old Dutch church that's 300 years old, and we had a tercentennial for the family in 1978, gathering this Riquois clan from all over the United States. It's an oddball enough name, so they were able to find almost everybody. And what a time we had for a weekend, right down near Tarrytown. It was great. Anyway, it becomes
The town of
Hurley, New York, sure.
Yeah, it was just wonderful, and they have all these wonderful stone houses that they open in July. You can go through them, and they go back to like the 1700s. Wonderful, wonderful little community. It was
You know,
just
I like what I see, and Calvin and I have attended many, where the little towns and villages here in northern New York are paying attention to their anniversary dates. And sometimes they're having like the town of Schuyler Falls has this town-wide, garage sale, flea market day, but they do a lot of historical things, and the local historian puts out all the photographs and decorates a little room in the town hall as it might have looked 120 years ago, and I think that's important to have all these little local celebrations. Don't you, Ron?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've been to how many? 100? 150? We've learned how to spell the word sesquicentennial, and all kinds of things. Sorry, I didn't mean to strangle you.
You didn't?
But do you visit? Do you all visit cemeteries a lot, or is?
Yes, we do. In fact, I don't know if Clyde ever told you on one of his videos that you did with him, his granddaughter was riding along with her mother, and she pointed to a cemetery they were going by. She says, "Look, that's the place that Grandpa works," because he was in so many cemeteries.
Oh, that would give you a strange feeling.
Oh, by all means.
Like we were doing his last book, and I looked up and found my name and my wife's name in the book.
Ooh.
We had already purchased our spot.
That's why, yeah.
You get in the book, even if you're still with us, but it does give
Isn't it
you
wonderful?
pause to think.
And let me show you something
I
on
wish you
Clyde
would.
Rabideau, okay? Clyde Rabideau has done these 3 books right here,
Yeah.
Headstone Inscriptions, and I know you've seen them before.
Oh, yeah.
And this is volume 3. This is the latest one that he has out. These 3 books include everything in all of these volumes. These are McClellan's volumes,
Of
okay?
course.
And there's so much information in these books, and he's put them all in these 3 books, and you can buy them. Where before we couldn't buy a McClellan record if we wanted to. We just came by them, luckily, I should say, yeah. Because we have others over here.
We have sources.
Yeah, we all have ways. We have ways.
Over here, we have the Vermont cemeteries. and we have a lot more to come up here. I just haven't had the chance to do them. Then we have the Canadian cemeteries. Now these are all, again, McClellan's records that we were lucky enough to get. We swapped with other societies and so on and so forth.
I want to I always have to mention Clyde Rabideau Sr. and this family in the same breath, because what they did with what they had to work with is absolutely fantastic when you stop to think of what they did, right? When
Right.
did they start? In the 40s?
I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you that. Maybe
Would
Bobby
anybody in
could.
this room guess? I think they started in the 40s.
See, I don't know. That's something you know more.
They
I don't
didn't
know.
have the modern technology. They certainly didn't have computers.
No.
But what they had was that passion that the Allens mentioned before, and they stuck with it until they theoretically got to every gravestone they could find
Exactly.
in this whole area.
My girls talk about when we used to go for a ride, it was always going to a ride to the cemetery. And we weren't. We were just going back and forth to wherever. They said, yeah, we know, Mom. You always took a new road so you could get a new cemetery.
You know, that's another point. For us, we're laughing when we're walking through cemeteries. We're saying, hey, look at this. For other people, they're saying, oh, my goodness, maybe we shouldn't walk here, or no, how do you dare to go through that cemetery? So a lot of people have a stigma against cemeteries, and they're afraid to death. Maybe that wasn't the right choice of words.
That was a good choice of words.
But
There are more people found without stones, being buried without
oh, yes, then there were. And that,
You're right, and that's a sad part, because people say, oh, they weren't buried there because I saw McClellan's records or I saw Clyde Rabideau's records. Not so. If they didn't have a tombstone in there, there was no way they could have recorded it.
and how many stillborn babies were buried in the basement of people's homes.
Oh, definitely, yep.
And because
Wait a minute, you can't be shouting across the room. Get over here.
Bobby can.
Bobby, yeah, she could, you could hear her in West Jay-Z.
because
I
there's
know.
a name on a tombstone doesn't mean the body's there.
That's right.
I know in Rouse's Point there's a tombstone, and they have yet to find out where the man is buried. His name is on the stone, but it's the family stone. And out of respect, they put his name on the stone. But nobody yet has figured out where the man's buried.
This is a perfect time. Everything sparks another story with me, and I'm sure it is with you.
Always.
But we've done a series of programs not only on the Battle of Plattsburgh, but on the Battle of Valcour, both very significant events in the history of the North Country. And there is a display at the Clinton County Historical Museum now of artifacts that they've retrieved from the Valcour site. There's a very systematic underwater archaeological search that is underway, which amazes me all by itself. But they found a cannon that had been blown apart, right? They found the name of the person who was killed when the cannon was blown apart. They found his tombstone and have made replicas of it and many photographs of it, have contacted descendants of the guy, and talk about a marvelous genealogical full circle. To me, that is great. And if they had never hauled that cannon up from the bottom of Lake Champlain off Valcour Island, the history of this person and the people he left behind would never have been public knowledge. And I don't know about you, but I find stuff like that extremely delicious.
Yes.
I love
Well,
it.
like the name changes of just the things in the area. Valcour. It wasn't always Valcour. Really.
I believe you.
My grandmother, on
Something
her
heartwarming,
death
huh?
certificate, she was born in Port Jackson.
Mhm.
Well, it didn't say Port Jackson what, it just said Port Jackson. And for the longest time, I looked and looked and looked for Port Jackson. It's Valcour. Valcour Landing is Port Jackson.
See, I knew
Because
that.
it was the little port.
My memory has a lot of
Mr. Bailey
cobwebs,
told me that.
because I'm really old. But I've heard that story before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And like we found a reference to, well, it's Erie Canal, but it wasn't. Oh, 9 Mile Creek.
9 Mile Creek.
I looked forever because in one of the church records I found someone was born at 9 Mile Creek. And then one day I was at the library in Moores and they had a catalog for book sales. And it said 9 Mile Creek, the history of the Erie Canal. And I found it. I found it.
Zippity doo dah. Do you scream out loud right in
Oh,
libraries
yes.
and things?
Oh, yes.
How can you help it?
You can't.
I'll do email, and because of what we do and my column and so on, I answer a lot of emails every day from all over the world, and somebody gives me a little piece of information, I'll be there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I'll scream out loud. My wife will come running in thinking I had a massive heart attack.
You couldn't have had a massive heart attack if you're still screaming.
No, I guess you're right there. Let's talk about what phases of your society have we not covered here today? Are you soliciting new membership all the time?
Always.
And how does one go about making that connection?
We have a website,
Which is?
NNYACGS.org. It gives the list of our officers. It gives our library, our open hours, publications that we have for sale. It always alerts you to the upcoming conferences. We have conferences twice a year with guest speakers, one in the spring and one in the fall. And our webmaster takes care of getting us pretty well up to date.
I'm glad you have a webmaster.
Yes, we do. Alan Bayshard's our webmaster.
That's really great. You
So-
need somebody who's good at it, way better at it than I am.
Oh,
When mine turns on, it doesn't
most-
kick me off.
most
I'm delighted.
Of my extraordinary feats in computerism are accidental.
Me too.
I hit the button, and if it does what I want, aha! I did it.
I have to tell a
I
story.
have no idea
I
how
have to tell a
did it.
story about my wife Kay, who will not. I have to make a hard copy of every email I get for her to read. She doesn't even like to look at the computer screen. She doesn't certainly want to get anywhere where she could brush up against a button on the keyboard. She tried to turn it on one day according to my very careful, explicit instructions. And this is many years ago when we had an old IBM 286, and up on the screen came a message, "What's this?"
And she immediately
She-
said, I don't know.
She walked away and will barely walk into the room again. So anyway,
Before we get any farther, the other expert that she has in her family is her son Craig.
Oh, he's my computer expert.
You're darn right he is. He's our computer.
we've heard you talking across the room, but
Yeah,
now
well-
it's your turn, baby. You got the whole spotlight.
I'm just like silent volunteer for this organization. My mother got me slightly interested.
Only slightly?
I'm getting sucked into it.
Yeah, it's like a giant vacuum cleaner.
It's
isn't it?
infectious, it is.
It really is.
And I've done some books for the society here. And because of my computer ease, not expertise, I'm trying to get them slowly to get this thing uncovered, as opposed to sitting here looking like a boat anchor.
You know, I would never, ever mention any names, and I love all the historians I've ever met because they all have that passion, and they have different ways of expressing it. But very often, unfortunately, many of the older people who are interested in history have not yet discovered the advantage in communications and communicating with some of those people in Australia with a stroke of a few keys. So they have to type out a letter on the old typewriter or the word processor and wait for a reply.
I just remember my parents like 20 years ago getting started in genealogy. And I'm like, what a waste of time, and like you say, it's such an edification in history, and it's timeline. It's a total timeline, and there's so many other particulars in it. It's quite interesting.
For somebody who is used to the tremendous speed of modern computers and broadband and DSL and all of that good
I
stuff,
still got a
doing
dial-up
it well, so do I. 56K is fast enough for me.
Yeah.
But in any case, that compared to the old Pony Express methods is tremendous. But what it does do it adds a little sense of frustration for you and me. I mean, I've kidded so many times about something not loading in time and wanting to drop kick my computer right into the
It's like, here's my next
nearby.
project right here. This is one of their,
Well,
one of
let's hold it
one
up
of-
so Calvin can take a look at it. What is it?
it's one of their journals.
We publish that twice a year.
And I'm going to attempt to scan it in OCR and see if I can put it all onto a disk. Thusly, in the future, if anybody wants to make extra copies of these for members, non-members, that, you know, because I guess they're for sale, I can give you all the particulars. They'll be able to make copies readily and quickly, and also have it on disk, which is a long-lasting format.
Sure. Well, let's talk about, I mean, you're the one that was holding up the for sale sign a while ago. Nowhere did she
books for
say on the
sale?
website that it said, send money.
Well, it's
So let's
totally
get into that
volunteer.
part of it.
I'm not really a spokesman about it. I know it's a totally volunteer and nonprofit organization. But I mean, there's so many people, I mean, you interviewed them today, that give their time. I'm a non-member. And I give my time and I try
Time to
and-
get us $5, isn't it?
5?
5! Every time he walks in the door, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I know exactly
Yeah.
what you mean. And time is valuable. And that's why we talk about this volunteer spirit, not only here in Keysville, but all over the great North Country. And I'm sure, young lady,
Oh, you're so flattering.
quote unquote,
Quote, unquote.
that the vast majority of the people who will be watching this show, and we have no idea who they are, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public in several counties in northern New York.
It's as well we don't know
But
sometimes.
yeah, that's true. But my point is that most of those people have never heard of you or this wonderful organization. So I think it's about time we came back, right, Bill?
Right.
After all of
This
this.
is a rare breed.
Oh, I know
Husband
that.
and wife, both interested in genealogy.
Generally, you're a genealogical
90%
widow,
of the
aren't
time,
you? Or a
it's either
genealogical
the wife
widower?
or the
Ordinarily.
Yeah.
husband. My wife wouldn't even go to no meetings. She don't want nothing to do with it.
It's difficult. So it's like learning, wanting to play golf every day, isn't it, Bill? You just want to get out of the house and sneak out with the clubs and get in the back door and say, "Going to the office." But anyway, it is. I think in the course of this program, you have, hopefully, all of you have instilled in certainly in Calvin and myself, but in others, kind of a little spirit of maybe I'll check this out.
I think that's a very good idea.
What were you saying, Calvin?
Let's relocate her right in front of a window here.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, just move over this way, Bobby. All right, we're just going to show people, as I promised about a half hour ago, what you have in this room and what people get when they become a member and so on. So whatever you want to show us, do it, Bobby.
Okay, they have access, of course, to our library. Our library is open from the 1st of April until the end of November. We're open only 2 days a week, but for members, if you call us or email us enough in advance, we can arrange. When I first started as librarian, there were maybe 3 of us on the library staff. Now I have about 15. I have a marvelous, marvelous library staff. And they're on call, and through the winter, if the weather permits, we will open for a member. We'll even open for a non-member, but we rather encourage people to join. Membership is $25 a year beginning. Our year begins on the 1st of September, and this coming year it will be $25 a year for individuals. And then the price goes accordingly. Families is $5 more, and students is a little less. We have application forms, and which were quite liberal. We have business cards. This back here is almost all history, primarily history, general history. In here, and we started out. We had little metal cabinets, the double door metal cabinets, when I first took over, and since then we've replaced them. We've had the place painted, we've had it carpeted, And then we began buying bookcases.
Before you go further, show what they get for their membership.
Now, this journal is published twice a year. It's articles by members, by board members, by contributors. It's family trees. It tells all about our organization. There's a query section. If you're a member, you're allowed an unlimited number of queries at the publisher's or the editor's actually discretion, because there's only so much room. It's only $3 a query if you're not a member, so which is not exorbitant certainly. We have material, source material, in printed form, on microfiche, on microfilm, and on CDs. We're fortunate enough now that we have a computer. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, half a dozen microfiche readers. We have a microfilm, microfiche reader printer, which we just bought within the last year, which has proved wonderful with the census reels. We are now getting into that. We have many of the census reels from the North Country and the counties here, some from Vermont, and now we're trying to work into Canada too. It's all connected. We have to. We've just gone through this. Some of the stuff is limited. We have New Hampshire, Delaware, as you can see. I think I spelled Delaware wrong. Oh, anyway.
You're human, in case anybody didn't know.
We exchange with 30 other genealogical societies.
Yeah.
We send them copies of our journal, and they send us copies of their material. And we try to keep the number at 30, and so far we've been quite fortunate. We've had donations, not all our donations. The books from Maine, Bill Marquis gave to us. The books from Massachusetts, I found at a secondhand bookstore in southern Vermont. They were terrible. All of these little books here. I found a local bookbinder who took them all, rebound them all, and we have a marvelous set of Massachusetts information. Then we started out, of course, primarily Quebec. This is family histories. Now these family histories were all donations by members or members' families. Now this is full of family histories. Some are only little pamphlets. We have a file cabinet over there. The top drawer is 2 sheets, 3 sheets, 4 sheets. Something that would get lost in here. But these have all been donated to us by our members or our members' families. And we're always looking for more, of course, naturally.
Oh, that's great.
And then some things we buy. We have Ontario, not too much. Quebec we have a lot of. We have many, many volumes from Quebec. Primarily, Quebec had marriage repertoires available. Now, baptism and burial repertoires are becoming more available. And as they are, of course, we're stamping them up. But we must keep up as best we can. As Bill said, you should spend X number of dollars on book purchases. Well, it's not always possible, but as much as it's possible, we do. They've been very generous. The Budget Committee's been very generous in my allowance for buying books, and I accept, people saying to me, well, gee, we don't have a book on this, or we don't have a book on that. Do you suppose we could get one? Well, you bring me the catalog. Let me look at it. Let me decide. I mean, it's not my decision. I don't make any unilateral decisions as far as this library goes. Yes, I'm the librarian, which only means I get to vacuum and see that the curtains get washed once in a while, and that the books get marked and put in the proper place, and they go in the file cabinet and all the rest of it. These are new acquisitions. This is all stuff that we have purchased within the last 6 months to a year. some of them don't amount to much. They're small. They're not very expensive. Some are very expensive.
A compendium of American
Yes.
genealogy?
This
Talk
was
about a tome.
Yes. There's a 7-volume set, and we just bought this within the last 6 months. And it also comes on CD. But I got the CD for Christmas because I requested it for my own use.
Yes.
But then I made, we will have it here in the library too. Then we have New York material, Vermont material, and we have our cemetery records, which is growing and growing and growing. We have 2 rooms now instead of the 1. We have this room and then we have the back room. We ran out of room. We did. We just ran out of room. But I mean, people are welcome to come. We're open on the Wednesdays from 1 until 6, and on Saturdays from 11 till 4. We don't throw anybody out. We do make kind of itchy noises when it gets to be 3:45 on Saturday afternoon, and we start shutting windows and turning off machines and that kind of
When
stuff.
you're a member, it's almost carte blanche. They can get in touch with you.
Oh,
almost
they
anytime.
email us, they phone us. I've had calls from California. I've had calls from the Dakotas. I've had emails from Australia. I had an email from Japan.
Did you really?
Yes, somebody who married a serviceman, and his family was from this area, and she was looking for material. So, from Okinawa.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? What's your address here?
My address?
This address of this organization if people want to write to you.
No, we have a post office box address.
Okay.
It's Post Office Box 1256, Plattsburgh, New York, 12901.
12901, and the phone number, would they call you or call here, or how would they call?
Should call me or Gloria Pratt. I'm 236-7567, and Gloria's 561-5728.
Area code 518.
Yes, of course. You have to supply that.
Well,
It's the town of Champlain.
I want to mention, Gloria, that the lady we were talking about before who was 104 is Hazel Rooney from Dannemora, and you found out so much about her. Actually, we were just so excited to talk to somebody who has that kind of energy and vitality and at age 104.
It's wonderful, and she fed me enough news or information, which wasn't that much, and I was just trying to find that book. Let me see if I can find where I
Right.
found first
Calvin-
how to get her, okay?
Calvin thought it might be interesting if we just pick a name and show you how we do a little bit of research.
Okay,
So you just happen to have a book.
this is the Headstone Inscriptions, especially the latest people who are, okay. Hazel Rooney, and she said that her name was Downs.
Yep, you got
Remember?
it.
So then I
okay.
know her husband is John Jay. He was born in 1897, died in 1962. And we have Hazel was born in 1898. And this is PE2, which I think is Peru.
It is.
I want to know which one. PE2 would be St. Augustine Cemetery. Okay?
See how-
So then I know that by being buried in St. Augustine Cemetery, that a lot of their parents or family would be born in Peru. Okay? So then what I would do is go to our Peru book, this is a new one. Thank you, Ron. And look up for Rooney's. Or was it Downs I found in here? I can't remember now.
Probably Downs, because her
I think it
family,
was.
I remember her saying they lived on a farm.
Yeah.
And how they went to school.
And how they
Either
didn't mind
walked or-
working or helping and, okay.
Boy, lots of Downs, huh?
These are the baptisms. Did I find Hazel's? No, it wasn't in here. I can't remember what other book I looked at, but I know I picked it up. I've got that all in the cards. I make up family sheets when I know people who die or whatever, and I make up a family sheet for them, okay? Because your obituary tells you everything. Tells you the mother, tells you the father, tells you the brothers, sisters, and their children, and their husbands, if they're married, or wives.
You mean if you pay enough for it, you get it?
No, you really don't have to, because you get that. My husband always kidding me about clipping the obituaries. You may die today, but I won't know about it till next week, because I won't get to that obituary till next week. But when I get to them, and especially if they're local people, which of course most of these people are, I have a file cabinet at home. I have 5 file cabinets, and I add these in all the time, okay? Now, say for one person one time sent our society a letter. They were looking for a generation of somebody or other, and they said, you probably never heard of them. No one has ever heard this name around. And we proceeded to read, and the name was Trombley. Now, do we have Trombleys, or do we know about Trombleys?
Trombley, with or without the E, with or without the Y, with 2 E's, with the 1 E, with all.
Now, another thing that is very helpful here, too, is we have a lot of people who donated, and I know you saw them already, family trees. If you've done a family tree and you submit it to our society, or any society, this gives people a chance to look at the family name and try to work on it from there, okay?
Let me ask you a quick question that came to my mind, Gloria. I know a couple of people who clip obituaries of people that they know. And then when these people become an obituary themselves, the family's probably going to throw out those scrapbooks.
Yes, they
Would,
do.
would your society love those scrapbooks?
Love them. Listen, we would love them, seriously.
How many do you think exist in drawers and attics and sideboards and hutches and...
A lot of them. And you know, the
Sellers and-
sad thing is a lot of people will sell their Bibles. They don't, but you know, their sale, because they've died and there's nobody left to take over, or they don't want them. They just send all these books to the auctions or whatever. And we've bought some. We've bought quite a bit of them. Not so much the society as the members. When we go to a garage sale, and if there's one sitting there, we'll pick it up. Because usually they're only a couple bucks.
Very
But you
often,
find
that's
funny-
the only record you have of that series of births and deaths.
We've had, in fact, in any of our journals, and I think she gave you one, right? Or she will give you one before you leave. In our journals, there's a place where we write different things. People write in about their family or whatever. And when we do a Bible, we'll put on the bottom, anyone who can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is your family, that you're connected to this family, we'll give you the Bible. We have the records already on record. But why shouldn't you have that Bible if you're
You
interested?
know, you feel exactly the way I do. I've mentioned this to Calvin before and mentioned it in my column and everywhere else. It kills me when a person dies and they sell the family Bible. Or, what's even worse is the photographs. People bring me these wonderful family albums, you know, from the Civil War era right up through 1910 or 1915. I recognized how somebody brought me one from Saranac. And I tracked down every house and every family in the picture.
See?
And don't you want to just say to somebody's great-great-grandson, take these, will you?
Yeah.
And hold them close to
If
you
you're
and
not
love
int-
them. And,
If you're not interested today, you will be, you know?
well, you know,
It's still your family.
it's, I mean, how many times have I literally cried when I see an old person die and seeing them taking out all those wonderful old scrapbooks?
Mm-hmm.
All the
And-
books and the papers, they go to the
Helps
dump.
and papers and go to the dump. And not only that, but a lot of times antiques and farm
Well,
equipment.
definitely,
and, oh,
definitely,
boy.
yeah. We've had a lot of scrapbooks that we've picked up, again, at auctions. And Dick Ward is a great one for picking up all these things for us.
Our good friend Richard.
Yeah, he goes to all these things, and he'll pick up these Bibles and photograph albums. In fact, he brought me 3 of them just a couple of weeks ago on people from Newport. And lo and behold,
Newport, Vermont.
Newport, Vermont.
Because
Lo
there's a
and
Newport,
behold,
New York,
yeah, right.
where my father used to live.
Opened up the book, and in that book were 5 generations of my uncle, my great uncle, really.
Come on.
I kid you not, I couldn't
Did you
believe
get
it.
little pity-patty
Oh, I couldn't believe
palpitations,
it.
did
Well, you know, I met his father before. I met my Uncle Preston. He was a great uncle. And I met his daughter, and I'd met her daughter. I never saw her kids, but I have her on my family tree. But, you know, I mean, I had no pictures. I have this wonderful picture, and I just couldn't believe it. You know, they said 5 generations. And when I was looking through with Dick, he was showing me some different spots, and he said, I've got one especially that you're going to be interested in. And then he showed me this shelter, and of course he knows that they're in my Yeah, I have the 5 generations. It's just
Do you
wonderful.
ever get the feeling there's a little magic going on here? I think the whole concept is magical. But sometimes when you walk into a bookstore in Springfield, Connecticut, or somewhere else, and you just happen to be drawn toward a book that has some of your family photographs and history, you say, somebody brought me here. I don't know who, but wherever you are, thanks
Ron,
a lot,
was it
right?
you telling me that you went to a cemetery one time? Somebody did. They'd gone to a cemetery one time, and they had given up on the name that they were looking for, and they had bent down to tie their shoe.
Sure.
And as they're getting up, they're looking straight ahead, and it was their family. Was that you telling me that? I thought it was-
Coincidence? I think not, because I don't
Exactly.
believe in coincidences.
I mean, it was just too good. It was a woman that had done it, but she said that she was been there all day, and she finally said, "I'm giving up." And for some reason had to bend down and tie her shoe. And as she's rising up, there's that name or that stone she was looking for all day.
Let's walk down this way. There are a few things we haven't seen, and Calvin doesn't want to leave any stones unturned. Speaking about grave,
This is our new machine that we have. This is a reader printer. You can read microfiche. In fact, I can show you what some of this does. But also, once you find what you want on the microfiche or the microfilm, and David Bell, who is one of a very nice board member, but he was so good to make us this shelf, and he's the one that's in charge of getting us our film. So whenever we appropriate money for censuses, then he knows which ones to buy for us, okay? And then all this does is, okay, there's one in there, and I don't know if you can pick up names on that or not, but this is a Tongay family. I had someone call me the other day looking for some information on Tongay, and so while I was waiting for you to get here, I thought I would work on it a little bit. The nice thing about this is, say for instance, I want this printed, all I have to do is hit this print button, and then whatever is printed between these 4 black corners will come out. So that way you don't have to say, what did it say, or copy it. Like, was it Ron saying a little while ago, how you sit there and write it all out?
oh, I've done that. How much research have I done in my life in libraries
And
in the
have
old
to write
days?
it.
Written, or I used to speak it into a tape recorder.
Yeah. And this is one of our newest acquisitions. I don't know how long
Nice.
ago
Very
we
nice.
got it.
2 years, I think.
2 years, has it been that long? And then we have the computer here. And this is another thing that we're very lucky about. We saved up money until we had enough, and then we finally purchased it. But we've had people donating CDs with information on family trees. We have disc, or whatever here, that people have given us a disc with their family tree on it. So if you're looking for a certain family, it's so easy to sit right
Oh,
down
boy.
here. And then all the PRDH that she talked to you about earlier is on a CD. I can't read those books. I don't even know how to use them. And they claim if I ever learned, they said I'd never leave them alone. I don't have to. We have it on CD, and CD does it all for us. Have you used the CD for? Oh, okay. They're beautiful. They're wonderful.
What else? Is there anything we haven't covered, Bobby?
The other room you didn't.
Well, we haven't been in the other room.
Well, there's upper rooms and there's other rooms, and let's go into the other room here, okay? Okay, we're in the other room. What do you got
This
here?
is our membership map. All the little bright spots are where we have members. Australia, France, Italy, a lot in Canada, all the states, Alaska, Hawaii.
Of course, Hawaii. You
We
got,
marked
we
every
got Clyde
one.
Rapid who was spending most of
Certainly
his
we
life
have.
there.
Certainly we have.
Oh, boy.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 microfiche readers. We have a copy machine.
These are probably those original cabinets you told me
These
about.
are the original cabinets.
Oh, they are, huh?
And now they have books in them that we have done.
Can we open one?
No, right there.
What?
That's the original Trudeau.
Isn't
That's Etienne. Yes. Those are out of LaForest books. LaForest wrote little stories on many of the old French people. And then they translated them into English. He's just about finished. The man is in his late 80s and he's not doing anymore, but we have the complete set here. So, and those are repros from it. We had them done for a conference, and We keep them
It's
displayed.
nice to keep them up there.
But
yeah.
these old cabinets were what we started with. That's what we had for our books. And then we got,
It's easier in this room to tell that it was a school, isn't it, huh?
yes, it's
Oh,
hard
goodness.
finished. It's,
Yeah.
What's that green book you have?
the green book is the history of the town of Shazy. That was nice.
Clever
And-
segue there. Kate.
Yes, wasn't that nice? It's again available. We had it reprinted a few years back, and through Northern New York American Canadian Genealogical Society, the book is available. And they can check it out on our website for price and shipping and handling. We also have all the back issues of the journals, if anyone's interested in any of them. And we want to give you guys one.
Well, that's very kind to do that.
Rip it in half, are we?
No.
No,
Cal- Cal-
each one.
Oh, that's even better.
There, you each have one, so you can see what we're
We
about.
wanted to share it from January through July. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Have you had any other questions to ask before we wrap up our little show here? Calvin, anything else that you,
People want to join? or-
yeah, if people want to join, call you. get on-
Write to our address that I gave you. Go on our website. You can print up an application form off the website. You can contact Gloria Pratt or myself by phone or by email. Well, unless I give you the email addresses, you're not going to get us, but
Yeah.
we welcome new members. You don't have to know a lot about it. You can be a rank beginner, or you can be a very seasoned genealogist, and I'm sure we can help.
And if there are
Some
people who've done this for a long time, who know a lot about North Country genealogy, want to share information
Oh,
about their own
yes. We are
families, surrounding
always-
towns,
Always looking for things. I had a man email me within the last 2 weeks. He has a collection of material and wanted to know if we'd like to have it. Something like 50 CDs and about 15 books. Marriage repertoires out of Canada. Could the society use them? The society can use anything. If you want to donate us a pencil, we'll take it.
I imagine most of you have spent some time at Special Collections down at Feinberg.
Oh, yes.
My
Mike,
good friend Wayne Miller would give him a little plug here.
well, Mike, who works there, Mike is one of our board members.
Oh, he is.
Yes, he
And
is.
he's also still our historian in the town of Scholar Falls.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. But he's a board member. He's our recording secretary at the moment.
See?
And we all wear a lot of hats.
Yeah. Well, it's important to do that. Sometimes you just have to keep moving. It's hard for him to shoot you when you're.
Yes.
You know, Bobby, I want to thank you personally for inviting me here today. Calvin's been here before, but a lot of it's not old hat because things do change over 10 years, you know?
Things change in 10 minutes.
Yeah. And it's just nice to learn all the stuff we've learned today and to whet people's appetites and get them started
Oh,
on their
I
own
hope it
little
does.
family search.
I hope
think
it
it's
does.
good for the soul to find out where you came from, isn't it, huh?
Yes,
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's nice to know where you're going,
Yeah.
but it's also nice to know where you've been.
Yeah, that's our philosophy,
yes.
100%.
Yeah.
Thanks again, and thanks to all those other people who were on our program today, and we always invite your comments to us. But on this topic, call this lady. She'll steer you in the right direction, and she won't steer you wrong. And who knows where we're going to be next